We're live. Mohit, welcome back to the podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm super excited to be back. I was doing some reflection based on our last conversation recently. And congratulations. I think that you're one of the very few people that when I was first starting to do the rounds for podcasts, you're one of the very few people that has sustained, grown, and actually showed your real value as a progression rather than somebody that's tried to sort of stay in one lane and make it all about themselves. So I really am happy to be back with you.
Well, thank you for saying that, and I appreciate the kind words. And I will say that even though I'm talking about myself a little bit now, I get shy about talking about myself in podcasts. So I find if I get down that road a little bit, when I go through and I start to edit, you can't see me because I'm editing, but I'm starting to cringe going, did I really say that about myself? Am I really talking about me? So, thank you for noticing that because that is something I try really hard to backtrack on. Is this your first time on the Riverside platform? Not to like plug them because I pay them for this software, but you see so many different things in what you do because you are always touring, whether it be like in person or virtually. But have you ever touched on the Riverside platform, or do you find a lot of your stuff is limited to like Zoom and Teams?
No, I have, to be honest with you, I beta tested way too many platforms from Riverside right down to what Rode was going to put out at one point as their own proprietary one. I think we're in a situation now where we're going to be able to test and try all these different things from ecosystems. They're going to be spun up in record amount of time. But the truth is, the business case isn't there yet right now for a lot of them to all exist. People have their complaints about every platform from
Yes.
the way that it's actually sized to what you could do automatically on other ones. But these are all subscription-based platforms. So the more people ride it out for a long period of time, the better the services will be. It's never going to get like it's never going to stay bad. It can't afford to stay bad. So
Can't.
yeah, I don't actively use Riverside for my own purposes, but I have to say it is much better than it was even 2 years ago.
Yeah, when I was sourcing a platform and making the transition to video, it came down to this point in StreamYard and just taking in all the data I could or the information or feedback or anecdotes from like Riverside, not from Riverside, from Reddit and so forth. It just, I went in this direction and yeah, couldn't be happier. But let's talk about a different company. Let's talk about your company, ThinkStart. So it's been a while since you've been on the pod. It was about 4 years ago, I think it was episode 80, and this is going to be episode 121. So let's start first with just in case someone's jumping into your story for the very first time, give us kind of a 101 on what ThinkStart is.
I would imagine that most people are jumping into whoever I am for the very first time. So this is a good time to reset. I'm basically like we spoke before and we know about each other. I'm a veteran TV guy. I produced in the television business for almost 2 decades and then crossed over to digital subsequently about 7 years ago now, full time with corporate clients and still keeping my foot in the media business, but not necessarily letting anything but digital and the progression of digital be my focus. What I noticed though quickly was that everything had to converge at a certain point where people that were really good at making good content weren't necessarily content strategists, and people who were really good at understanding how social media and digital distribution work don't really necessarily know how to make the real engines run and the big budgets run when it came down to everything from ads to capturing audiences. So what I did was I created Things Start with this idea that where does somebody like myself sit? Somebody who's got a plethora of media experience, plus corporate experience, plus is super excited about what's happening with technology and innovation. So that's how Think Start was originally created because I thought, well, wait a minute, all these people don't have the answers and don't have the time to go look for them. So I'm going to be the one. I'm going to be the one that's going to go out there to figure out what the next phase of social media is, the next phase of digital distribution is, and content marketing, et cetera, et cetera. The problem is, like, not everyone's willing to buy into that game plan because things change so rapidly. So, what I've noticed is through those years of being able to work with people one on one, the technology has been changing so fast that even my company has had to change with it. So now ThinkStart is proudly an elastic company. We have freelancers from different places around the world. And all we do is work with clients based on their specific needs, whether it is beta testing an app that they want to spin up and not spend a bunch of money on, or it's AI blueprints based on the way they want to adopt it in their companies. What's great about it is I still have that flexibility to make the company more aligned with what I want it to be, rather than trying to be a one-stop solution stop that many places try to do.
Let's pick up the conversation on AI because if we go back to 2021 when we had first met and did our first podcast, we would have jokingly say that, AI is going to take over the world. You just focus on things like the Terminator movies. But in a way, there's been a proliferation and it is taking over the world in more of a productive way for the most part. So let's start first with how do you I mean, how your clients clearly turn to you to understand AI, but how do you educate yourself first, especially when you're in this sort of ecosystem where literally, Mohit, you could wake up one morning and find out that there's something like DeepSeek. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, didn't know about this AI platform. Now I've got to learn that. So let's start first with like, what does square one look like for you when you are adopting a new AI platform or you're testing out? This is before you take it out to your clients and start making recommendations.
Well, yeah, well, that's a great point. I think what a lot of people forget is that you can't skip the step of understanding how these models work and understand exactly what's being put together on the back end in order to be able to communicate it on the front end. See, one of the things I realize in traveling and speaking is there's two types of speaking. There's knowledge and information sharing, and there's also a magic show that a lot of speakers try to sort of put on in the background, which is look how quickly I can do something, or look how quick, like amazing these videos are going to be.
Kinda
Well,
like the big shiny things that people focus on. You're like, "You made that video in 5 seconds," and that's
exactly.
all they're focused on.
Right. So quickly, what I learned was AI was going to be much more of a disruptor than people could imagine. While you could sort of do a show on viral TikToks and stuff like that as a speaker, artificial intelligence has had, in my foresight, had the ability to actually be a much big of a disruptor. So I early on went and learned about how these things were being built, why they were going to be problematic, where they were getting sources of information from, what large language models meant. And to that point, I'll be honest with you, three of the certifications that I went and I got in 2022 are already expired because of how quickly the technology is changing. And so, I was sort of like a work in progress in this idea that as long as I understood the base models of what OpenAI, what Microsoft, and what Google were doing, I knew that everything was being built on that, and nothing was going to all of a sudden be a detour. So I have followed the worst versions of all of these apps, and I've seen all of the
I like the way
hallucinate.
you put that.
No, they were
It's
bad.
true, but it's like but I love the way you put it, though,
They were
because
so bad, and I feel embarrassed that I tried to show people, even first generations of certain things, now that I've seen how quickly things can work. But the truth is, we're beyond the hype cycle now. We're in the adoption cycle where every single industry that has any potential to want to either scale, understand data better, understand their own business better, are going to be adopting some form of artificial intelligence into their work.
let's talk about how you're helping your clients adopt AI. Do you start first with some sort of questionnaire with them to because there are a lot of different ways you could go. Like, how do you deduce which way you're gonna go with this rather than just kinda show up and take them through the next 10 big things rather than just to streamline it to what might be relevant and prevalent to them and their productivity?
My big thing is demystification. So I start with the story so far. So people sort of like the Coles notes or the recap you get at the beginning of a Netflix series. That's what I start with, which is what you don't have to worry about. This is not happening. Demystify, demystify, demystify. And then I get into the problems that you really want to solve for, right? Are you looking to mitigate your marketing department, or are you looking to actually respond to RFPs more? Those are two separate AI tools that actually will benefit you, not both with the same priority. But I'll tell you, I've fallen flat on my face in this process as well. I've done blueprints for people that have exposed a large gap in people power they have, or a large amount of data that they didn't realize wasn't clean and tagged properly. There's so many things that separate industries start to uncover when they realize they're not going to be able to harness the real power of AI yet, right? So what I do like to start with is a discussion about the people that are going to be a part of the project first and what their hope and intent is. Then I demystify with my quick, here's where we've come, here's what you don't have to worry about, here's how easy it is to understand, sort of my John Oliver approach to the ongoing history of artificial intelligence. And then I can drill it down to any ecosystem. And that's the beauty about it, because most people don't come to me for enterprise transformation. They want to come to me originally to understand what the potential is. We could farm out the enterprise to any, the highest bidder after that. But I got to tell you, a lot of companies are still far away from that.
So it's very much so on the micro level, if I'm hearing you
Yeah.
correctly. Micro
Well,
level.
look, I speak to leaders more than I speak to CTOs, because CTOs will be the first ones to put their put their guards up, saying none of this is vetted. The security is not in place. We're going to rely on enterprise software like Microsoft to build these tools, and blah de blah de blah. And that's right for certain enterprises. You don't want to risk. You don't want to necessarily get involved. I'm not here to sell AI. That's what I try to tell people when I'm on these calls. I'm here to figure out what AI can do for the problems that you actually have. And if I can't figure that out with you, I'm not going to point you in that right direction, and this business doesn't necessarily have to happen. That's the beauty about what this space needs right now: a proper amount of advisors that actually aren't tied to specific brands and can really talk about what the benefits are of each.
I want to go back to something you said about 3 minutes ago, that in your discussions, you're helping them uncover personnel gaps. So it's kind of creating potentially opportunities for people because all we ever hear about AI is going to come in, it's going to take your job. So I want to ask you this question. Have you ever gone back to those company job boards that you did consulting for and found that they now have specific or more generic AI requirements in the actual job description? Because I'm thinking back to something that kind of caught me off guard a couple of years ago, where I was looking at a job description and it actually had must have experience using Google Workplace documents. It was the first time I'd ever heard that. Like I
Right.
obviously knew it wasn't had used it, but before it was, it was the standard thing, must have Microsoft Office knowledge, specifically PowerPoint, Word, and Excel, and so forth. And you become so numb to it because it's been going on for 20 years and everyone knows how to use it that you kind of put it out. But I'd seen them actually call out something completely separate. And I'm wondering if you're starting to see that or if you've noticed it's kind of filtering its way into job descriptions. I haven't noticed that yet, but I wonder after talking to you if any of your clients are like, well, he uncovered this problem for us. Maybe this is the problem we need to be hiring for.
So those are, I think there's three questions there. And so to your first original question, no, I haven't specifically gone and looked at their job boards. But B, I have staffed up AI hubs for companies. So I've created opportunities for junior people within artificial intelligence to work with companies as a result of the blueprinting that I've done. So to look at where they could find the use of, for instance, an intern at a school that is working on large language models. All of that I've created opportunity with. I have noticed in job descriptions, I've noticed two things in job descriptions. One, I've noticed when AI is being used to write job descriptions because of the way that it's being written. And it's really weird because certain things don't exist, but AI will call them out as they exist.
Nice.
And then I've also noticed that there is this inclusion, and then it's so funny that you mentioned that relevancy associated with, yes, you eventually saw must have Windows experience, what must have, all that on job descriptions. Now what's happening is you have this dichotomy where you think for some reason HR must believe that AI is a young person's sport, because in the junior job descriptions it's saying must have experience using AI, specifically things like ChatGPT, OpenAI, et cetera, et cetera. You don't see them in the senior management ones. You know what I mean? So
That's
that is,
interesting.
yeah, it's because it's not a young person's sport. This is really about adapting to what's happening right now. You cannot let yourself believe that anybody who has AI experience is going to be somebody that's new to an organization or in a junior role.
You make an interesting point because it seems like we're treating it the way every time there's been a new medium introduced, it's like, oh, you know what? Maybe the young people are into it. They're the ones that will gravitate towards it. And a great example that everyone watching or listening might be familiar with, or at least most people, is Mad Men, because there was a part in that show where at the agency, there was like a TV division. And this was back when like TV was like on the heels of radio,
Okay.
and it was funny because they kind of treated that division like, yeah, those guys are really into TV, whatever, kind of the same way. And I'm going to speak from experience here, where when I was moving from TV to digital, people looked at me like, are you crazy? Like, why are
Hmm.
you leaving TV? TV's king. And now it's completely on its head. So it's funny because they're actually applying that same principle, or not necessarily the same principles, but the same sort of approach where it's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, the young people are into it. They'll come in and, we'll let them play with
it's
this
almost a
fun new
cultural
tools."
thing, right?
A
It's
cultural
almost,
thing, yes.
yeah.
I mean, I wanna say it's almost an age-related thing too, but I don't wanna sound ageist, but it
The
definitely
only
does in
reason
a
I
way.
don't think it's specifically an age related thing is because the the industry that we speak of has its certain sense of protectionism, right? Where it comes down to keeping your seniority and, you're the senior reporter, senior producer, blah, 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 blah. But with this technology in particular, everyone has it on their phone. They don't, you know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
they're using it unbeknownst to them. It's not like somebody signed them up for social media when they didn't want to be, right? Or
Yeah, that's a
signed
good
them up
point.
for Gmail when they didn't want to be. They had to go and set up an account. And so that's the only reason I don't think it's that drilled down into the age side where it's all the kids use Snapchat, all the kids use Twitter. Like I remember specifically being in the City TV newsroom and signing the reporters up for their first Twitter accounts and having to explain that it wasn't a violation, that it was like you could quote it and stuff. I do, gosh, I remember for the longest time at City TV that we couldn't even actually quote Wikipedia as being a source for things. And so I can relate to what you're saying, which is this idea that, you know, on one hand, you will have a school of thought that is that this is a young person's art, artificial intelligence is, and it's something that they're going to have to carry the torch on. But you and I both know that it's impossible to ignore.
I want to talk about how you use AI in your day to day, and I want to break it into two parts. So the first part, and maybe there's some overlap here. First part would be, which tool do you use the most for your personal life? And then the second part of the question is exactly the same thing, but which tool do you use for the most part in your professional life? So let's start with your personal life.
Well, the funny thing is, this whole interview so far has been AI. So I think it's pretty interesting that you didn't figure that out right from the
Well, you're
hello,
used.
hello,
I'm here.
hello, hello,
Are you screwing
hello,
with me?
Huh? Hello. Yes, I am screwing.
All right,
Um,
because that stuff's pretty convincing.
no, one of the things I said early in the conversation is the truth. I probably have one full browser of 8 tabs, beta testing apps that I'm a part of user groups from. I'm in international groups, beta testing things. I'm helping spin up things on GitHub. I'm trying things out for people that'll never see the light of day. And I'm trying things out that I think could possibly change the way that people do monotonous tasks. It's amazing. None of it is sustainable the way it's actually being rolled out because it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money. There's an environmental impact. It costs physical money from people to keep subscriptions going. Nobody's got a clear business plan about how they're going to be able to preserve your data and not reuse it to train. There's all of those problems that exist. So I stick to what I know I can use in my tiers, right? But I don't necessarily advertise for anybody specifically because I don't think we're there yet. Like I will not go on a yearly subscription for any AI tool because of how quickly things are changing. I'll pay the extra monthly charge for certain things, but I also will work tirelessly with people that are working on some amazing products right now. Because look, you and I both know that it took just 2 years ago, it took 8 months to launch an app. And that's from wireframe to, and if you committed to it and you had a team on it, et cetera, et cetera. You can prototype it for every presentation moving forward, like with a free tier on any of these no code apps. I think the language in which we start to communicate is going to benefit, we're going to benefit a lot more if we start to use these tools the way that we want to communicate. And anybody who's looked at a blank cursor for a long period of time or has had to try to find the right picture for a long period of time will immediately start to see the benefits of saving time with some of this adoption.
Yeah, Getty Images. Whew, I don't know how they're going to survive this. Like any stock image company.
Oh my gosh, don't get me started. Like it's sometimes what I would do is I would try to prompt in some of the image generation a detail that is so significant to a picture being authentic of a time, and what it would come up with, it's just like, you back away sometimes from the computer and think to yourself, how is this, like, I what really used to freak me out is when I started to take the old 16, like, no, the old pictures of my parents. Like, I've never seen video of my parents, right? I see my parents now, they're alive, et cetera, et cetera. But the classic sort of 60s, 70s immigrant experience, there wasn't a lot of video footage of that time. Seeing some of that come to life with AI is so, like, You know what I mean? It's
I know exactly what you're talking about. There was an Instagram page that dabbles in AI, and one of the things that they had put up was it was exactly like you said. It was an old photo of, say, New York City, Times Square in like the 30s. And then they were able to turn that into like a 5 or 6 second looped video, where just people are moving around talking. Maybe there's a car going by. And it is incredibly surreal because you look at it and you're like, oh, someone dug up old footage. And
yeah.
then you look at the fine print and no, it's anything but original
Huh.
footage.
So let's bring that back to one quick thing, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
One of
go
the
for it.
things, one of the dangers here is the rewriting of history, right?
Mm.
And we don't have a massive move towards media literacy being rebooted, and that's something that I really think needs to happen, because if you're not teaching your kids history in history class, they're going to learn it through some form of synthetic media. They're not going to learn it by looking at film strips like we did back in the day. And so the whole education system is going to have to consider what it is that we're using synthetic media for. Are we doing it so that we can help battle propaganda, or are we doing it to actually tell stories that need to be noted? And then think about that from a historical perspective. Canada, for example, does it have a digital archive somewhere of its, world, of its the country's history? Do all these things exist in a place that our kids and kids' will be able to access and create stories out of, etc.? These are the things that sort of have me up at night when it comes down to the use of this technology and what happens next with it, because I'm fascinated by it, but I fear it as well.
See, my concern is going to be what it does to it does to the social skills of the generation that grows up with it. So I'm in sales. I write my share of prospect emails, communication, and so forth every day. I'm going to be using AI to simplify it, but I already know how to write a damn good email. And that's not me bragging. But I'm afraid that someone coming up now is going to be like, oh, I'm going to be trained to do it with AI. And it's like, well, but what happens if, God forbid, that AI tool that you pay for goes down for a day? I mean, it happens with all services. We've seen it happen. Go back and look at what happened with Microsoft and the CrowdStrike update that happened about, what was it, about a year ago, less than a year ago? What happens when, you still have to work, but you can't rely on that AI tool to help you with those sort of like interpersonal communication skills or duties that, yeah, you should be able to innately do. So I'm always concerned that that's going to happen. And then we could go back to kids graduating in the pandemic from the pandemic as well. I think we touched on it last time and how that's already impacting their skills. But that's my thing, is like, I'd really love to see people continue to learn the skills, and then AI comes in and simplifies it and cuts the time it takes to do something like an email and a half or even less of that.
Yeah, I think you again, you bring up some great points, but it's also the remember, your way of working today is not going to be the way of working 5 years from now. And
I know.
so it's kind of that weird thing. Let me give you an example. 5 years ago, if I was raising my kids, I would have all been like, you should learn how to code. Who's getting laid off right now?
Yeah.
Coders, right?
Yep.
Such a weird thing. In schools, you were good sending kids to coding camp instead of sending them to hockey. And that was just one of those things. You're going to make a lot more money as a coder. Well, like, things are changing. One of my biggest missions right now, Victor, I should tell you, is that I've been trying to figure out ways to save newsrooms across the country, because we've gone through such a large cycle of slimming down, that maybe one of the things that I think AI might be able to help with is actual workflows to help newsrooms in different parts of this country sustain themselves and be better and understand how to empower people with the right tools to be citizen journalists. I'm doing that as a separate project, all with AI. So think about how far reaching it is that we're talking about some of this technology.
Well, I wish you a lot of success with that, because I think local news needs to be preserved. And I don't think we scream at the
Oh,
top of
yeah.
our lungs just about how important it is to democracy.
I listen, one of the things, and again, I don't sell AI, but the amount of time that producers in newsrooms spend doing the wrong things already indicates that the whole mechanism has not been rethought properly. And so I used to do syndication for CBC Radio, and I would do these wonderful sort of runs across the country from East Coast to the West Coast. And it was always fascinating because you would always hear the local news in all these markets, but it was also depleting because you knew that, oh, wait a minute, that's the last station in that market. And that's the one signal that everybody from Windsor hears, and nobody else in that surrounding area has a tornado watch that they can, you know what I mean? Winnipeg, same
I know
thing.
exactly what you're saying.
So
Yeah.
But the flip side to that is everybody has their phone, and there are people in their 50s and 60s that would love to be, new career reporters and contributors and stuff. They're not going to make a living off of it, but they're people that go to city hall meetings, and they're people that are involved in communities and can create a community around. Yeah, the days are gone where you're all getting six-figure salaries, but people still have an emphasis on local news that's required more than just the bottom line, and I think technology can help fix some of those problems.
I think you should be pitching that idea to government because it seems like that's where a lot of those government grants would come in. And even though we do a pretty good job of supporting public media in this country, I think maybe we need to redefine what public service media sounds like. And in Canada and Ontario, it's basically TVO and the CBC. What else could we do with it? Like on that sort of local level, if someone could get a certification and that certification and those grants meant that they had to produce reliable and accurate content in a timely fashion, I'd be on board with that.
Well, and I think you speak to a very good point, which is you are on board with the idea. Now, what's beautiful about this time period, Victor, is that the idea is so doable. It's not that we should all drop everything and do it, right? It's a matter of, okay, well, I can show you exactly what how it breaks down. If you find the pioneers, the people, the investors, the second career people, all the people that have the time, efforts, and things to lead it, that's still needed. That doesn't get done by the robot, right? All that gets done is a series of templates that you can roll out across the country, have in one cloud server, and you all start to not have to worry about things like large office spaces in centralized cities. And everybody, having to, travel to different places and hiring camera crews, et cetera, et cetera. All of that stuff comes into a smaller bucket now. It's almost the way that Moses originally planned it.
Oh,
Moses,
Moses Neimer. We're referring to Speaker's Corner.
yes, like back in the day, said one person should be able to do all of it. But to that point, I'll tell you one last thing about this is that I know about 7 to 9 people that are sort of aging themselves out of faculties, and they're not working in media anymore, and they get it because they don't want to, etc. But they're also extremely happy. They would love to be able to do something from Bruce County that wasn't about trying to start a blog. They would love to do something that isn't about starting a Substack. But if a group of them came together, it would make sense. And it would make sense now because they could all log into the same place, have the same access to resources, don't have to relearn anything. They already done the heavy lifting from a career standpoint. And that's the type of thing that I think can help. And it's not hard. Somebody like myself who understands both sides can show how these formulas can work to people's benefit now. Don't get me wrong. You still have to do the work, which is the reporting, right? Which is going to drive people nuts. You still got to ask the tough questions, got to come up with the things, the blah, blah, the blah, the blah, right? And still got to put it out. But I think now more than ever, it's never been easier.
And sit through very boring council meetings, although sometimes they can be pretty lively.
But that's where it's going to be different, right? Because if you're only going to do this, if you're doing it because you're passionate about it, or you're not
That's
going to
true.
do it because you got assigned to this instead of the weather storm.
Let's jump into something that you already kind of alluded to, and that's your speaking tour. So you've been going around and speaking all across the globe. Let's start first with a couple of places you recently visited, and what kind of topics are they bringing you in to talk about?
I've been very lucky when it comes down to professional speaking. At first, I thought to myself, "Oh, I'm really confident. I can get out there and just speak. People think I'm charismatic. I do media, et cetera, et cetera." Victor, I was wrong because it's such a competitive space, and especially because of the rebuild post COVID, it was even more a competitive space to the point where, in some cases, I was on stages after astronauts. You know what I mean? There were
Mm.
so many people trying to sort of get an audience and stuff, but I was lucky, and the way I was lucky was that I started to communicate with people about how they should be preparing themselves for what's next. Not necessarily a futurist, but somebody who could really capitalize on my media knowledge to understand what people are talking about. And that's what resonated. So I started in Toronto. I did about 3 major conferences in Toronto. And from there, it just skyrocketed. I got an agent and another one in the US as well. And I've done everything from speaking at national dairy conferences to national accounting conferences in the US to international broadcasting conferences, and all with this technology impact in mind, but all with separate conversations. The dairy farmers were fascinated with how AI is continually influencing the robotics end of what they're doing, but also they all didn't understand how it was going to help their communication side when it came down to using AI in the near future. And then when I was speaking with accountants were super excited about being able to use things. And by the time I got to the actual conference, half of the tools had been banned. So what we're
Really?
talking, oh yeah, we're
Oh,
we're talking about like me. I am living AI rollout in real time. I'm going to these places. I'm going to medical conferences where people on one side of the aisle are like, we are never going to touch this technology. It's full of bias, et cetera, et cetera. And then you've got booths of people that are all they're doing is selling AI technology to enhance what's happening in the medical field. So, it's fascinating to me. I love being on the front row of it, but at the same time, there's no shortage of topics to be talking about.
is there a specific category of AI that interests you the most? For me, you literally fed this one right to me. It's how AI is going to impact just the medical industry, if I can even call it the medical industry, but just medicine in general. Like you hear things about how AI can detect microscopic cancer cells better than just your general not your ultrasound, but your CT scan can and so forth. And I'm just really excited about how it's going to revolutionize health. But how about yourself? Is it healthcare? Is it finance? Is there just a sector that you're looking at going, I cannot wait to see what AI does here next?
Honestly, I think you and I are from the elk where we're not even going to be talking about it as being AI in the next year. It's almost like calling it the internet. You know what I mean? We're going
Yeah.
to look back at these conversations and understand that what you just discussed about healthcare, that impact is far beyond me being able to paint myself into a Charlie Chaplin movie. You know what I mean? So it's not the same thing and the same impact. Instead, what we have to do is peel this layer, this band-aid off from all of the hype surrounded about job displacement, all over the hype around about how it's going to affect kids in the schools. All of that is true, but it can't be painted with the same brush. You know, uh, just in September, think about this for a second, Victor. Just in September, Ontario schools had banned cell phone use inside of classrooms. In March, I got an email from my kids' schools explaining what AI tools are permitted to use inside of classrooms. Could you explain to me what these kids are going to use these AI tools on if you can't use cell phones in your classroom? Like,
Yeah.
it's it's mind-boggling to me about how quickly things are changing. I am more excited about this next step, which is this idea that whatever profession you're in, whatever way you want to embrace your need to take back 2 hours of your life, I guarantee you will find those tools within artificial intelligence.
Let's take a step back to Think Start. So I want to come back to it and go, okay, we've had a chance to talk about how things have, how it started and where it's evolved since we last spoke 4 years ago. But let's look 5 years into the future. So get out your magic eight ball, give it a shake. What do you think your company is going to look like in say the next, 2.5 and 5 years?
Well, to be honest with you, I don't even want to be running a company. I would much rather be running thought leadership and think tanks and working with people who are trying to develop this innovation for the future. For me to sit at the helm of something, to stop and say, I've got all the answers, these are all your proprietary GPTs, these are all your apps. That's a very sort of like tech bro way to look at things. I'm looking for a ThinkStart to be involved with meaningful, interesting solutions, things that are going to move the needle on changing education and having 13 more filmmakers make films in Canada each year. Not 13, I don't know why I just said that, but you know what I mean. Like I'm looking forward to all of that. What I'll tell you, it's what's more important to me to point out is that I'm not looking to create a big startup. I'm not looking to create the next big solution. I'm not trying to make this company bigger than it should be. I'm just trying to be happy with the setting of the pace right now when it comes down to this tech and being the thought leader that I have been able to prepare myself for. I'm just really happy that media still calls me right now and says, "Hey, Mohit, we appreciate your insight. We think you know what you're talking about. And we appreciate the fact that you offer this to us because it really does help me feel confident about where this is all going."
Well, it should just be media that calls you. We now have a new minister of AI in Canada. So Evan Solomon, ex-journalist. So I mean, he comes from the newsrooms like you do as well. So I think that's interesting, those parallels between AI and the newsroom, between the two of you. So what's your thoughts on that? Because that ministry is maybe about what, 3 weeks old, if even that. No, I don't even think it's that old.
Well, naturally, I can't comment on the makeup of a ministry, but what I can,
But just the concept of it, like, now we have a ministry of AI, like,
yeah,
we're taking it seriously as a sector rather than
sure.
just it's kind of a subsection of technology.
So the truth is, Canada is behind on the global AI arms race. We have invested maybe 1/12 of what the rest of the world has within their own countries when it comes down to the spreading of computer use and the expansion of international cooperation, including the procurement of AI related chips that we will need. We lean heavily on our cloud structure. On the US right now. And so having a minister of AI and innovation is very important just to establish those two main things, which is where do we fit into the global landscape? What do we offer? And also, how do we retain the right talent? The bigger issue that's going to end up happening is that with the US and China actually investing the amount of money that they are in artificial intelligence, it's going to take a lot of people from around the world to actually build it because those are the bright minds. Canada, unfortunately, has sat on the laurels of being an innovator back in the day. We have a lot good history of our contribution to AI. But unless we start investing a lot more money in it, we're going to lose some really great minds when it comes down to this field as a result of brain drain and not enough money being invested at a quicker pace.
So let's pretend for a second that Prime Minister Carney makes some changes in his cabinet and he appoints you as the Minister of AI. What are the three you go into your first meeting with him to present what your manifesto looks like. What would be the top 3 points that you would bring forward to him if you were the Minister of AI?
I would say to begin with, we need to understand what the rules are with reference to our data sovereignty. Every major country that's invested in artificial intelligence has already created a blueprint associated with what the rules are about what AI companies can and cannot collect from their citizens. Canada doesn't have one. There also needs to be a one mic approach. I've done a lot of research and I've understood that there's all these numbers floated around about different companies that have been invested in by different levels of government, but it's not clear. Is this the same 50 million that was invested 2 years ago, or is that based on stuff that you already had? Does Bell Rogers own this? Like, there's a lot of confusion about it from an industry standpoint. And the third thing, and this is goes back to a little bit to the political thing, is that we don't need ribbon cutting. We need industry at the table. There's so many times. What have you heard from Google, Apple, all the big tech companies? You only hear about them when they're being fined, when they're being regulated, when they're being called to task. Now you need to bring them with what do you have in your bank? What's in there? What's that innovation that you're working on? So many catastrophes have happened. Not catastrophes, I shouldn't say, that's a big word. So many projects have not happened in Canada from an innovation standpoint because of regulation. And you go back to some of what Google proposed and what Microsoft wanted to do within Canada. We don't have a lot of good history of sponsoring innovation. I fear that that could be a part of the problem moving forward. So, as the AI minister, future AI minister, that's what I would focus on.
Were you referencing Google trying to build that sort of micro level smart city in Toronto?
Mhm.
Because there was
I
a
was.
lot of hype around that in the harbor front. And for anyone listening or watching, they were going to come in and fund this section of the harbor front. I don't remember how big it was. Don't think it was more than a square, 1 or 2 square blocks. And it was going to be chock full of a lot of great innovative tricks. And then bureaucracy kicked in. And did the city finally kick them out or the government, or did Google finally say, just we're done with this, we're out?
Yeah, to be honest with you, the reason I didn't quote any of what you just said is because I was fuzzy on the details, but I did note, I do note that that's the longstanding relationship issue.
I have no problem delivering a fuzzy story about something that might have happened 7 or 8 years ago. That's why I'm here. So, it was big news. So, just as we wind things down, what industry or job do you think is really going to be heavily impacted by AI in the next couple of years?
Education is going to be heavily impacted by AI. And it's one of my missions right now to get to as many boards as possible to talk about how the retraining of teachers from kindergarten right to grade 12 needs to happen. It can be a benefit to process. It can be a benefit to personalized learning for kids. It can be a benefit to understanding how kids need to adjust their learning. I guarantee that some degrees that happen in university level will skip a year as a result of things being able to be done at a much faster level. I think education is going to be the big thing that I'd be focused on if while I continue to build my business and look for the right people that would want my, services, etc. The second thing, gosh, like look at the entire entertainment business. The entire
Yes.
entertainment business, for whatever it's worth right now, it should not cost this much money to make a film. It should not cost this much money to put your product out there. We spent years trying to sponsor what diversity, and now you have all these people just sitting waiting to make the one Canadian film that they can in this world. Screw the model. It doesn't have to happen anymore. You don't need to wait for any gatekeepers. The actual power to make this for your community, for your friends, with your crew is here. You know what I mean? Like it costs one thousandth it would for you to make your film. It's just people, unfortunately, I think we're still stuck in this place that unless it's all being done for us, I don't know if I could still do it. And that's not the phase that we're in right now. I just, the other part of this is anybody who really feared technology because of the way social media, their world of social media was, this isn't that. And that's what I really worry about with some people where people take a step back, even hosts that I do interviews with, they're like, oh, well, I'm not a techie. And I'm like, this isn't about being a techie. This is really about you not having to physically hold your boarding pass anymore. You know what I mean? This is about things like that. And also being aware, because if you're raising kids and you have a family, or if you have anybody in your life that is unaware of how quickly this is disrupting technology, they could be just as vulnerable.
An analogy I'd use is it's the new pencil. Like you need it, you need it to get by. You need to learn how to use it. Like growing up as a child, you need to learn how to use a pencil because you need to learn how to write and so forth. And swap pencil out with pick whatever AI platform it is that's going to dominate, or at least that's going to be recommended by education or your job, and that's what you're going to need to get through.
Yeah, that's a great point. I But in a much more simpler way, like somebody like yourself, for example, that has worked so hard and still can remember how painful it is to not have like a backup saved of something, or how to edit or notes or anything, brother. Like your life is only going to get better because you're passionate about what you want to do and you're going to have more time to do it. You are not going to have to worry about, did Mohit speak too fast in that thing? Do I have to slow down the pitch? Does the music have this? Blah, blah, blah. And I look forward to people like you putting even more content out, quality content, because life becomes a little bit easier for you.
Well, the quality of my content depends on the quality of my guests, like yourself, sir. And thank you. Mohit, before we jump to rapid fire questions, because we're going to do you're the second guest who's going to do the new round of rapid fire questions for returning guests. If anyone listening or watching this wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
I would love to have a discovery conversation at ThinkStart.ca. If you log on to ThinkStart.ca, you can find out how you can get in touch with me. Ask for my services. I understand your problems.
All right. You ready for rapid fire questions?
All right.
Okay, the wallpaper on your phone.
Is the Drake Summer 16 tour?
Did you say Drake?
Yes.
So between Drake and Kendrick Lamar, are you team Drake then? Or are you just not part of that?
I'm going to have to leave for you even asking that.
I didn't even know they were beefing until the Super Bowl. I had to read all the notes under and be like, "Oh, that's what this was all about." Oh, I thought
You
he was
missed
just
all oh wow.
I
You
missed
missed the
out.
whole thing, eh? You missed the whole
It's
thing.
it's like sleeping through the next world war, which I hope never happens. So, anyways, might sound insensitive, but you guys get it. Anyways, your favorite travel destination.
My favorite travel destination has to be right now. It's Amsterdam, only because I've been there 3 years in a row now. So, yeah, I
When you
love
go
it.
when you go and you get a chance to speak, do you get a little bit of personal time for yourself to see the city? Or are you in and out pretty
Now I do,
quickly?
yeah, only because I've gone there a few times now and I've made friends in the city. And if you ever get a chance to understand what Europe is doing in the media business, you'll be extremely inspired to continue to grow. They are the one place that I continue to look at as being a place that makes me feel like we are in the right, we're headed in the right direction.
If you could live anywhere else in the world, where would it be?
I don't think I'd live anywhere else.
Okay. So describe a social media post you authored that garnered a considerable amount of attention.
Um, oh, I have a few, man. One time like during a commercial, one time Steph Curry, like there was a commercial for Steph Curry in a car commercial once, and like he was all smooth and suave, and his wife interrupts the commercial by calling him and asking him to do something on the way home, so it sort of breaks that fourth wall. And I tweeted out like, "What kind of girl is Aisha Curry to not know he was filming a commercial at that time?" And thousands of retweets for some random Aisha Curry retweeted it. Like it just became this thing where I like people were like, "Yeah, Aisha, what's wrong?" Like people became. It was honestly the most innocuous. I kept looking at my phone, going, "Why is this the thing?" I also got a lot of cred when Barack Obama followed me on Twitter. At that time became really like a almost a local. Why? Who is this guy? I have no clue to this day. I have not cursed it, but he's the only reason why I'm still on X and Twitter. Um, yeah, man, I've had a few moments. I've had like I am one of the very few people in this world who has a selfie with Warren Buffett. And that was before AI. And so luckily when it actually did the rounds and Warren Buffett Twitter land, I became a little bit of a local celeb there as well.
Nice. Okay, a bit of a softball question for a public speaker like yourself. If you could give a TED talk on anything, what would the topic be?
You know, I'm very, 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 very lucky. I have, like we've spoken about, I've been on air, on radio, on podcasts, and I very rarely come as myself, or am I rarely am an actor, but I rarely come as myself. I have never felt like I have something left to say, if that makes sense. I never walk away even from my 4 minute interviews on CP24 and think to myself, gosh, I wish I had more time. I'm so grateful for all of it that I never like I don't have a mysterious, oh, I would do a TED talk about all my favorite interviews I've done. Or I would do a thing about how wrong I was about the business that I ended up working in. Instead, I'm very fortunate. I get to have amazing conversations with people like yourself. When I do get an audience, I never take it for granted. And I have no misgivings that I'm not bigger or better than anyone else. So, whatever story that's left to be told, I'll continue telling it.
If you could have dinner with anyone dead or alive, who would it be?
Probably Mahatma Gandhi, mainly because I would like how little he'd eat, and I could probably get it for a lot cheaper than most celebrities.
All
I don't
right.
know what I meant by that.
It's all good.
Okay. Absolutely. That was like, talk about ending with a whimper. Yes.
And that is your mic drop moment. Okay, and we're gonna end things right here. Mohit, thank you so much for coming back on. Appreciate it.
Victor, congratulations once again on keeping this podcast going, and thanks for having me back.